Chris Mooney, the author who wrote The Republican War on Science, has this article up at Mother Jones Magazine where he goes over 7 reasons why people are more likely to believe in God than evolution. And it's actually a great article because it shows you that there are a lot of smart people out there, but they have reasons that they think are legitimate for not wanting to accept evolution. And so I thought it'd be helpful. Let's go over some of these reasons because those are things that we as science advocates have to put up with, and we have to find a way to overcome that, at least in the way we talk about science, if we really want to get people to accept evolution. Number 1 is biological essentialism. And what this basically means is when you see a group of lions, you assume that a lot of people are prone to assume that those lions have nothing to do with us as humans. Like they are that species, or spiders are their species, and we're a totally different species, and we're not interconnected. And evolution teaches us that no, we actually are all distant relatives. Like every living thing is connected in this web, even though we may be distant relatives from some creatures and very close relatives, relatively close relatives to other creatures. So a lot of people find it very hard to believe that we're related to trees, that we're related to bugs, and we're related to elephants. And that's something we have to overcome if we want to teach people how evolution works. Number 2 is teleological thinking. And this is the idea that everything has a purpose. So if you ask like a little kid, you know, why is that cloud so dark? Or what's the point of that cloud? The kid has an explanation. It's to bring rain. You know, why does the zebra have stripes? Well, there's a reason for it. Everything has a reason. And evolutionarily speaking, yeah, there are reasons for a lot of these things. Why does the zebra have stripes? There are reasons for that. Why does the chameleon change color? There are reasons for that. But then we automatically think everything has a purpose. You know, why is that mountain there? Well, because God put it there. You know, why are we designed the way we are? Well, there had to be a designer who made us the way we are. And we've seen that sort of thinking when it comes to intelligent design and trying to push that into science curriculums across the country. Not everything has to have a purpose that goes back to God. There may be natural explanations for it, but for a lot of things that don't have a natural explanation, and for things that look so incredibly designed that they couldn't possibly have been, you know, naturally designed, at least from people's perspective, they're very apt to just say a higher power must have been involved. So it's easy to believe that. I mean, I can understand why people believe that, but it's not true, and there's no evidence for that. Number 3 is overactive agency detection. And have you ever seen those like pieces of toast that are burnt and people say they see Jesus or the Virgin Mary in it? Why does that happen? That sort of pareidolia happens because we look at something and we're very prone to see a face. We're very prone to see humans at work, even if we don't have direct evidence for it. And so when you see humans designed as seemingly amazingly as we are, you don't just say a higher power did it. We want to say a person did it. We want to say God did it. And so for an evolutionary biologist to come around and say, well, no, you are the process of natural selection, just like that tree was, just like that mountain was, that's very hard to overcome when you think God designed you and a person had a hand in your creation. Number 4 is dualism. And without getting too philosophical about this, dualism is this idea that there is a difference between your mind and your body. And a lot of people have this belief that, you know, yeah, they have a physical body here, but there's a soul. And when they die, their body may die, but their soul will live on. And those are 2 separate things. And because biologists haven't really come up with this good explanation for how our conscience evolved, how our ability to think evolved the way it did, it's very hard for people to believe that we just naturally grew our brains and our ability to think cognitively and do all these amazing processes with our brains. So they assume that God had to put that spark in us. And it's hard for them to realize that, no, our mind and body evolved at the same time, and this concept of a soul is just fictional. But it is hard to explain to people, you know, how did our mind evolve, even if they could kind of understand where our bodies evolved from. Number 5, inability to comprehend vast time scales. I think this is probably one of the main reasons that there is. The Earth has been around for like 4.54 billion years, and humans, as we know humans, have been around for like less than 1 million years. And people have no idea how to think about these sorts of time frames. I mean, think about this. If you're looking at this screen and this is 1 billion years, where did humans exist? And the truth is, they existed like less than a pixel on this side of the screen. I mean, we are so recent, given the vast time that has existed that our universe has existed, that it's crazy to think about. I think I've heard it said by some scientists, if you stretch your hands completely out, humans existed on humans came into existence at the very tips of your fingertips, at the end of your fingernails. That's when humans came into being. And it's such a small percentage of all the time that has passed. So when we say humans evolved over millions of years, that really is a long time. I mean, there's so much time for evolution to work and for natural selection to have an effect. But people think no, they think it has to happen in their lifetime. That's the sort of flaw you see when people say oh, I've never seen a monkey give birth to a human. I mean, there's lots of problems with someone who says that, but they're thinking, oh, it has to happen immediately. We go from one species to another species like that. And that's because they have a hard time understanding, no, we're only alive for a blink. But, the time it takes for evolution to happen, we're talking about several lifetimes and several millions of lifetimes. That's how long it takes. And when you think of it that way, it actually does make sense how evolution could happen like that. But we're not tuned in to see things that way. Number 6 is group morality and tribalism. And basically, think about this. You go into any church in this country, and the people there think they are good. And they probably are generally good, but they believe their religion is the reason they are good. And Christians believe God is the reason, it's the social glue that holds people together. And so when atheists come around and, start trying to dismantle their religion, they're not just worried on a philosophical sense or a theological sense. They're worried that our entire social structure is coming apart. I mean, you hear that sort of argument when people try to fight for gay marriage. They say you're trying to ruin the family because they know things through the context of God. And all of a sudden, evolution comes along and says, well, you know how you thought God created you and it happened 6,000 years ago and all that? That's not true. This is what actually happened, and we have the evidence to back it up. Well, now you're worried that, no, because if I agree with that and my beliefs start to crumble, what else is going to fall alongside it? Am I going to start, doing wicked things? Those people who say, if you believe in evolution, just social Darwinism, let's kill all the handicapped people, let's kill all the babies. These are the people who think that if you allow evolution or the thinking of how it works to permeate into our minds, everything will just crumble in our society. And it's ridiculous. But there's this tribalism, this idea that we are as a group cohesive because of certain beliefs. And as soon as those beliefs go away, everything else is going to fall by the wayside as well. That's not going to happen, but you can understand why people might fear that. And that segues into number 7, which is fear and the need for certainty. I mean, think about the options you have on the table here. Do you believe that God, the stories in Genesis, God just poofed us into existence several thousand years ago, which is very easy to understand, very simplistic? Or do you believe that nature guided us into existence, over the course of millions, billions of years, if you go back to the microbes? And that explanation, while the evidence backs it up, is a lot harder to understand. You have to put a lot of thinking into understanding how evolution works. There's a lot of stuff we don't know about how it works. How did that very first organism even come into being? There's a lot more uncertainty with evolutionary thinking. Whereas the Genesis account, the story of creation, the story of Adam and Eve, and even if you don't believe that, this idea that God just created us, that doesn't take a lot of thought. You just have to believe it. And so for people to say, oh, evolution's coming along and I need to believe in that, that requires them to let go of something they always believed in, that they always knew the answer to, and jump ship to this thing where we don't know everything about how it works and why it works and, all the mechanisms of it. But you know what? I'm okay with that because that's exciting for me. There's more to learn. We don't know everything. That to me is exciting. And not to mention the fact that the evidence just supports it, whereas the evidence doesn't support anything the Bible says in regards to creation. But you can understand why people would be afraid of believing in evolution after a lifetime of believing that God created us. Remember, the point of all this is not to give any justification to why people should believe in God, but to point out that there are reasons why people don't quickly accept evolution, even though you can throw mountains of evidence at them and they're still not going to accept it. And what I think Chris Mooney was trying to show us is that there are reasons that people are afraid to jump ship to evolution. That doesn't mean they're all good reasons. It doesn't mean those are good defenses, but it means if we want to be good science communicators, if we want to convince people of why they should accept evolution, we have to understand those are some of the big obstacles that we have to help them overcome if we want them to, accept evidence. My name is Hemant Mehta, and I write for friendlyatheist.com. Please leave your comments and thoughts below, and we will check them out.